How do everybody? So I've got an incredibly shocking story here. I know it has been quite a while since I've done my last video. This one though really got me interested, and it's only a very short article. Now, for those of you who are regulars to my channel, you'll know that I do bang on about the grooming gang scandal and the complicity of organisations like the police, councils, schools, things like that. Well, this is a story here which exemplifies exactly what I go on about. And a lot of the stories I reference are going back, say, 10 years and older. You know, some of them are like 20 years old. This is quite recent. I believe 6 years ago this story goes back. So this is incredibly recent that this has happened. So even you could suppose that even today this is still potentially happening across the country. And this is why I do say quite often as well, we need serious consequences for the people who engage in these activities. It is awful that the police are doing this, although I do feel I have to say this isn't all police officers. Many police officers are disgusted by this, but for some reason the police seem to not deal with police officers engaging in this, and I do really wonder why senior police officers are not getting arrested and why. I mean, I don't know. It beggars belief. I can't understand it. I can't get my head around it because if I'd have engaged when I was in the army, if I'd have engaged in comparable situations to this, I would have been on a war crimes tribunal for breaking the Geneva Convention. What these officers are doing, and council workers and people like that are doing, they are crimes against humanity. These are actually crimes against humanity, what they're engaging in. Beyond scandalous. And why none of these people are ending up in The Hague, or at least in the Crown Court, at the very least, is beyond me. I can't get my head around it. I will put a link below to the story so you can read it yourself. I'll get on with it and we'll see if there's anything to say beyond the story itself as we get through it. So, Barrow victim breaks silence on grooming ordeal and justice denied. I believe the young lady in this story as well has waived her right to anonymity in order to get the story out as well. So she's incredibly brave for doing that. This story is about the grooming, rape and abuse of children in Barrow, Cumbria, of girls sometimes still in their school uniform. So we're talking about people here who are just absolute mega nonces and mega predators and are targeting obviously underage girls who they view as being vulnerable. For those of you who don't know, Barrow-in-Furness is in the northwest of England. It's on the south coast of Cumbria. Cumbria is a bit like a bit of an archipelago in how it sticks out of England. And that's coast on three sides of it. Mountainous in the middle, obviously very low land around the edges. So most of the people live on the edges of Cumbria who live there. Very sparsely populated part of England. Barrow-in-Furness has very little industry there. It's very disconnected from the rest of England because of where it's located. It's got very poor access to it from the motorways. A lot of poverty, a lot of crime, and the only real industry there is nuclear submarine pens for doing the maintenance on the nuclear submarines. Obviously, high-skilled jobs. A lot of people get brought in from out of town for doing those jobs. They do try and train people from the local area, but there's a lot of problems there with employment and with unemployment and with crime. So a lot of vulnerable people, very underprivileged young people, which is the modus operandi of these gangs targeting those sorts of girls as well in these sorts of cases. It is a familiar tale. Rotherham and Rochdale now bywords for the historic grooming scandal which rocked the country and from which famously lessons were supposed to have been learned. No, when they say lessons are learned, that is basically a way of trying to exonerate themselves of any guilt and basically telling you we're not going to change a single thing because it's just vague and nebulous. Yeah, lessons will be learned, but what does that even mean? It means nothing. It actually means nothing because unless very specific things start to happen and get put into place, nothing changes. And as I said in previous videos, they need solid incentive structures to encourage these people to make the right decisions. Because at the moment, the police seem to have an incentive that if they investigate these gangs, they will get labelled racists and bigots, and it'll affect their careers. So for them, they're thinking of their futures and thinking, well, do I really want to do this? Do I want all the trouble and the hassle of it? No, if I just bury it, it'll go away and there'll be no negative consequences to me because the police seem to close ranks and protect their officers when they do that. So they see if we, and this would need government backing really, but I do think really that they should be facing court martials. They should be taken out of the police's hands and even out of our court's hands, and it should go to court martial, the military court justice system should take control of this, and they should have to sit in front of brigadiers and generals, in my opinion, who will look very unfavourably on people not carrying out their duty in service of the crown and the king, because that is what the police are doing. They are in service of the crown and the king. I think they would see it as actually treasonous, and I think we should bring up the death penalty for those found guilty. You should be lined up against the wall, and your only option really should be whether you want a blindfold or not. That's my opinion, and I'm sure in fact I'm sure there's many police officers who actually agree with that as well, who are probably disgusted by their colleagues engaging in these sorts of cover-ups and just want and who join the police to do the right thing. You know, we must remember that as well. You know, it's very, and I am guilty of doing it myself in the past, of, you know, going off on the police, but we do need to remember that the majority of the police are great people, so let's always keep that in mind. A month ago, 3 brothers were convicted of a raft of serious sexual offences against children across Barrow and in Leeds. Oh, what a surprise. They must have cousins over in Leeds, mustn't they? They must be related, because that's also another modus operandi of these people, is that they have very large families which are extended, and they work in a network sort of web around the whole of the country, where they have cousins, and those cousins have cousins in those places, and they're able to get around with each other, and they seem to protect each other as well. And I do think that's actually part of the problem as well, is the police don't want to deal with that family network of the spontaneity of having a sudden uprising and a riot, which we saw after the Manchester incident, where the Manchester airport police were assaulted. One of them had the nose broken, I think possibly the jaw, and the 2 men involved in that, 2 men of Pakistani descent, I believe they are, or possibly Afghan descent, haven't even been charged yet. You know, that's 3 months ago. You know, if Dave here was to assault a police officer and break the nose and break a police officer's jaw, you can bet your bottom dollar that within 24 hours I'd be charged, and I'd probably be in court within a week. You know, and isn't it strange how when the perpetrators are of a foreign heritage and they engage in the most brutal of crimes against police officers, that suddenly the police can't charge them? Very, very strange. But anyway, after that happened, there was about 50 to 100 people of Pakistani, Bangladeshi descent suddenly appeared outside a police station in, I think it was Rotherham. There was a massive mob of them. The police had to barricade themselves inside, and I think that's the problem, is the police are scared of these people. I genuinely do believe that the police are actually scared and intimidated by them, which is why they don't want to rock the boat. Maybe the army need bringing in to deal with this again, and the Marines, the Royal Marine Commandos. Maybe that's what we need to look at doing to get a grip of this situation. Any conviction of historical abuse must be seen as a success, but tonight we can reveal that police knew some of what was happening in Barrow as far back as 2009. I reckon it'll be even further back than that, but that's probably as far as they're willing to investigate. And that's these crimes are so prevalent, and there's so many of them, that they're having to have cut-off points of how far they go back. Some of these crimes, they reckon, go back to the 70s. You know, in some of these towns, as far back as the 1970s. That's older than me. You know, it's crazy just how long these have been happening and have been getting covered up. It has taken 15 years for some of the abused girls to get justice. Our report focuses on one young woman, Ellie Reynolds. She identified one of the brothers to police as her alleged abuser 6 years ago, but her case never got to court. And this is the worst part. Instead, the authorities tried to prosecute her. She's taken the extraordinary step of waiving her right to anonymity to tell us what happened. I think the police actually tried to charge her with attempted blackmail of her abuser. Can you imagine that? This young woman, when she was a child, was getting repeatedly, I'm assuming, raped, possibly branded, most likely pimped, drugged, plied with alcohol. They'll have had cousins and brothers coming around. That's what they do with these young girls. They have like a list of them. They ply them with drugs and alcohol, have them in the room, and then the brothers and cousins will come through and all have a go. Repeatedly, day after day after day, multiples, hundreds and hundreds of people having a go on these girls. It's awful. You cannot imagine. And in fact, what I will do on the community part of my page, I'll link in a video from the Winston Marshall channel. Funnily enough, which I watched today on funnily enough, on these sorts of crimes as well. That video, if you're watching this, please at some point watch that, and you will hear some of the absolute horrors of what happened to these girls. It is unforgivable, and how the death penalty has not been brought back for these people, it beggars belief for me. It really, really does. I can't understand it, other than moral cowardice on the parts of the authorities who are dealing with this. The fact that they are not willing to do what actually needs to be done to deal with this problem. Absolute cowards. Barrow is a town which went to war with itself after another girl's claims of abuse at the hands of an Asian grooming gang turned out to be lies. Yeah, well, that as well was also awful. You know, I mean, this is awful that these crimes have happened. However, that girl doing that and making up lies about an owner of a restaurant, I believe, or a takeaway, in Barrow Inverness and absolutely lying about him, that is equally as evil and equally as bad, and she should be facing the death penalty for that as well. You know, I mean, absolute equal treatment with that, you know. This isn't just a one-way stream, you know. But we need to also remember, though, that that is a one-off, and unfortunately, the media likes to keep portraying that one single story out. Well, there was that one girl in Barrow who lied about it. There was that one girl in Barrow who lied about it. It's like, yeah, but there's up to 1 million girls who've actually been abused and have the crimes covered up by lots and lots of brown men, unfortunately. Yeah, it is equally as evil, but the scale is just not comparable. It is just absolutely, it's like comparing an ant to an elephant. You know, just two totally different scales of reference to look at. For any Ellie Reynolds, the legal by the way, though, that doesn't diminish the impact that had on that man and his family's lives, by the way. You know, obviously, he is still a human being. And to him, even though it's one person and one case where that's happened, that's his entire life that was nearly ruined. And he could have ended up in prison for a long time, wrongly convicted for something that he never did. So I don't want to minimise the impact on that one man and his family, by the way. You know, but I'm talking about here as the you know, like in the gross, you know, in the net, the gross, yeah, so to speak, you know. Anyway, for Ellie Reynolds, the legal process has kept her silence until now, when for the first time we can tell her story of justice denied. Warning, this report contains descriptions of rape and sexual assault, which some may find distressing. There's then a link to the story, I believe, below that. So I'm going to leave it at that. Just a quick video on that. As I say, on the community page, I will link that Winston Marshall video. I'll put it in the description as well, actually, so it's easy for people. I'll do both, so it's easy for people to find. Harrowing stuff. Never fails to shock me that this still happens. How we are not having a conversation on bringing back the death penalty for people who not only commit these crimes, but also those who cover them up and actually gaslight the victims and the families. Because it's not just the girls that this happens to. Multiple family members across England as well have actually been arrested, and the police have tried to charge them with things like aggravated racial crimes, you know, like trying to stir up racial hatred and things like that, rather than dealing with the crimes themselves. Terrible, terrible, terrible things. The whole situation just stinks worse than an open sewer. Really, really bad. As I say, I'll leave it at that. Please do check out the link, and please do watch that Winston Marshall video. It is heart-wrenching at times, very upsetting, but it will really, really open your eyes to just how awful the whole system has been for these poor victims and the families. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time. Take care and goodbye.